I need you to imagine something with me. It's almost midnight. The town is quiet in that heavy way small towns get at night, when even the drunks have stumbled home and the only sound left is the hum of distant highway noise and the occasional dog barking at nothing. You're lying in bed, half asleep, when suddenly your dog, your calm, sweet, never causes problems dog, sits up, stares at the door, and starts growling. Not barking, not whining, growling, low, deep, and steady. You tell yourself it's nothing. Maybe he heard a raccoon, maybe a car door, maybe a stray cat. But then he turns his head toward you, and there's something in his eyes that freezes you where you lie. Not fear, not excitement, urgency, like he's trying to tell you, get up, now. That's where my story really begins. Because that night, I made a decision I still don't fully understand. I put on my shoes, I grabbed a flashlight, and I followed my dog into the dark. If I could go back, I'm not sure I would do it again. Not because of what I saw, but because of what I learned. My name is Daniel, and this is the true story of the night my dog led me somewhere I have never been able to explain. A place I know was real, a place that still visits me in my dreams, a place that, to this day, no one believes actually exists. But it does. I've been there, and so did my dog. His name was Max. Max was the kind of dog that made strangers smile. A medium-sized mutt with a golden brown coat, floppy ears, and eyes that always looked kinder than yours. I adopted him from a shelter 3 years before that night, and in those 3 years I can count on one hand the number of times he barked at anything that wasn't obviously a threat. Like the delivery guy who always banged too hard on the door, or the neighbor who thought it was funny to wear a rubber werewolf mask during Halloween. Max was gentle, soft-hearted. He loved kids, hated loud noises, and slept curled up near the base of my bed every single night like some furry guardian who never took a day off. We had a rhythm, Max and I. In the mornings, we walked the same loop through the neighborhood, past Mrs. Ramirez's front yard with the plastic flamingos, past the old oak tree on Maple Street that everyone said had been there since the town was founded, down to the little park with the broken swings and graffiti-covered bench. In the evenings, after work, we took a different route along the edge of town, where the houses thinned out and the fields began. There was an old trail that used to be part of a railroad line, a narrow path flanked by knee-high grass and telephone poles that didn't seem to connect to anything anymore. Max loved that trail. He'd walk a few steps ahead of me, tail wagging, occasionally looking back as if to make sure I hadn't vanished. If you saw us on any given day, you'd think we belonged to a simple, ordinary life. No drama, no misteri, no horror. But there were signs, little things I only recognize now when I look back, that something was watching us long before that night. The first sign came in early autumn. The air had just started turning crisp, and the sunset was happening earlier every day. We were walking along the old trail like always. My breath made small ghosts in front of me, and Max trotted along, his tags jingling softly. About halfway down the trail, there was a gap in the fence that led into a patch of woods. It was private property technically, but everyone in town knew the owner lived states away and never came back. Teenagers went there to drink. Hunters cut through it during the season. I had never been inside those woods. Not once. But Max had always sniffed in that direction, tail wagging, like he wanted to go explore. I never let him. Not because I was afraid. Just respect, I guess. Or habit. That evening, though, Max stopped dead at the gap. His tail went still. He stood stiff, muscles tense, ears forward, staring into the darkness between the trees. "Come on, buddy," I said, tugging the leash gently. "Let's go." He didn't move. He didn't growl. He just stared, as if he were listening to something I couldn't hear. "Max," I said again. Slowly, he lowered his head, still staring, and then very softly he whined. It was such a small sound that if I hadn't been standing right beside him, I might have missed it. I don't know why, but that sound made the back of my neck prickle. The trees weren't that thick. I could see patches of fading light between them, but the air beyond the fence looked different, heavier somehow, as if the woods were a solid, breathing thing watching us back. It was just for a moment. Then a car passed on the road behind us, its headlights sweeping across the trail, and Max startled. He blinked, shook his head, and just like that he was normal again. Tongue out, tail wagging, ready to walk. I laughed it off. We went home. I forgot about it. For a while. The second sign came a few weeks later. This time it was the middle of the night. I woke up to the sound of claws tapping against hardwood floor. At first I thought Max was just changing positions. He sometimes moved from the foot of the bed to the foot of the door depending on how warm it was. But the tapping didn't stop.
Top, top, top.
Pause.
Top, 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 top.
I opened my eyes. The room was dark, except for the faint glow from the digital clock on my nightstand. 3:14 a.m. Max, I whispered. Silhouetted in the faint rectangular smear of light from the window, I could see him standing. Not lying down, not curled up. Standing at the bedroom door, staring at it like he was waiting for someone to walk through. His ears were up. His tail was stiff. "Hey, buddy. Come here." I murmured. "Nothing." "Max," I said again, sitting up this time. He turned his head halfway toward me. Even in the dark, I could see his eyes. They were wider than usual. Not panicked. Not aggressive. Alert. He looked back at the door. I listened. The house was silent. No creaking. No pipes. No cars passing outside. Just that deep, thick silence that makes every small sound suddenly feel loud. Then Max did something I had never seen him do in 3 years. He stepped backward, closer to my bed, but kept his eyes on the door. And then he growled. It was a low rumble, deep in his chest, so quiet I felt it more than I heard it. The hairs on my arms stood up. "Hey!" I whispered. "What's wrong?" He kept growling. Nothing moved. The doorknob didn't turn. There were no shadows under the crack. No footsteps. Nothing. But somehow the space just beyond that door felt occupied. Like someone was standing inches away on the other side. Listening. I grabbed my phone and turned on the flashlight. The beam cut across the room, harsh and white. Pointed it at the door. The light spilled under it and lit the hallway beyond in a sharp, narrow line. "Stay," I told Max. He didn't listen. As soon as I swung my legs out of bed and stood up, he moved with me, pressing against my leg, positioning himself slightly ahead, like he was trying to put his body between me and the door. I don't know why I did what I did next. Maybe it was pride. Maybe it was irritation. Maybe it was that stupid human instinct that refuses to admit fear when there's clearly nothing there. I opened the door. The hallway was empty. The living room beyond was dark and still. The only sound was the ticking of the clock on the wall. Max sniffed the air, still tense, his growl fading into a series of sharp sniffs. He walked forward, then to the left, then right, like he was tracing something invisible. I turned on the lamp in the living room. Everything looked normal. The couch, the coffee table, the pile of mail on the counter, the shoes by the door. No open windows. No signs of a break-in. After a few minutes, Max relaxed. He shook himself, yawned, and padded back to the bedroom like nothing had happened. I followed, heart pounding for reasons I didn't fully understand. By morning, I had decided it was just one of those things. Maybe he heard a possum outside. Maybe a branch scraped the window. Dogs hear things we don't. It's what they do. Life went on. Work, bills, walks, sunsets. Until the night everything shifted. It was late November when it finally happened. The air had that sharp, metallic cold that sneaks into your lungs when you breathe. Most of the leaves had fallen, leaving the trees outside my bedroom window looking like black veins against a faded orange sky. That day had been ordinary in every possible way. Emails, a broken printer at work, leftover pasta for dinner, a couple of YouTube videos on autoplay while I answered messages. Around 11:30 p.m., I turned off the TV, washed my plate, and checked that the front door was locked. Habit more than fear. Max followed me to the bedroom, curled up on his usual spot at the foot of the bed, and let out a long sigh as I turned off the light. I must have fallen asleep within minutes. I don't remember dreaming. I only remember the voice. Not a human voice. The voice of my dog. Not barking. Not whining. A sharp, urgent woof that snapped me awake like someone had thrown cold water on my face. I sat up. Max was at the door again. But this time he wasn't growling. He was pacing. Back and forth. Back and forth. He'd walk to the door, stop, look at me, then walk back to the side of the bed, then to the door again. In the sliver of light coming from the street lamp outside, I could see his chest rising and falling faster than normal. "Max!" I muttered, my voice groggy. "What is it?" He stopped pacing and stared at me. There is no way to explain this without sounding like I'm making it up, but I know what I saw. Max looked at me the way a person looks at you when they've already decided something and are waiting for you to catch up. He walked to the door. He looked back at me, and then, very deliberately, he pawed once at the floor, then again, 3 times. Slow, firm, like a knock. A chill slid down my spine. I glanced at the clock. 12:47 a.m. "Do you want to go out?" I asked, even though he never did that at this hour. He always held it until morning. Always. Max's tail was stiff. Not wagging. Not tucked. Just braced. He let out a low bark. Not loud. Just one. I swung my legs out of bed and stood, every movement feeling heavier than it should. The air in the room felt strange. Denser somehow, like the humidity before a storm, but dry. I slipped on my shoes. I didn't know why. It just felt like I'd need them. Max watched me, then turned back to the door and stood, posture alert, like a soldier waiting for a command. "Okay," I said. "Okay, let's go see then." I opened the bedroom door. This time the hallway didn't feel empty. Felt expectant, like something had been waiting for the moment that door would open. The house was quiet. No faucets dripping. No fridge humming. Just that thick, heavy silence, pressing in from all sides. Max walked ahead, but he kept glancing back to make sure I was following. His nails clicked softly on the floor as we passed the bathroom, the closet, and emerged into the living room. That's when I noticed something that made my stomach twist. The front door. I always locked it at night. Always. It was a ritual. Check the deadbolt. Check the handle. Walk away. Now the deadbolt was still turned. But the handle was slightly off. Not enough to be open. Just enough to look like someone at some point had pressed down on it. I stared at it. My hand went cold. "Did I?" I whispered, half to myself. Max stepped to the doormat, sniffed once, and then, without warning, whipped his head toward the back of the house. The sliding glass door that led to the tiny backyard was covered by curtains. Thin, pale curtains that usually swayed a little with the draft. They were perfectly still now. Max padded toward them, his body low, head extended like he was tracking a scent on the ground that I couldn't see. I followed him, every instinct in me telling me not to. At the edge of the curtain, he stopped. He lifted his head. He looked at me, and then he whined. It was that same soft, broken sound from weeks ago at the gap in the fence by the old trail. "Do you want to go out back?" I asked, my voice shaking a little. He didn't bark. He didn't wag. He just stared. I pulled the curtain aside. The backyard was a dim rectangle of frost-kissed grass and a leaning wooden fence. The world beyond was darkness. No neighbors, lights. No traffic. Nothing. I flipped the small switch beside the door. The porch light blinked on, flooding the yard in a dull, yellowish glow. Nothing moved. Max stood at the threshold, sniffing. That's when I felt it. Pressure. Not physical, not like a hand on my shoulder, but like a thought pressing against the inside of my skull. A single, clear impression that was not mine. Follow him. It was so sudden, so specific, that I actually glanced around, half expecting to see someone else in the room. There was no one, just me, and my dog, and the open door to the cold, silent night. Max stepped out first. He trotted into the yard, then stopped suddenly near the back fence. He turned left, then right, then left again. Then he did something I will never forget. He turned back toward me, tail raised, ears forward, eyes fixed on mine, and he barked. Once, sharp, commanding. It wasn't, "Come play." It wasn't, "Look, I found a cat." It was, "Come." And I came. I grabbed my jacket from the hook near the kitchen, slipped it on over my t-shirt, and stepped out into the yard, not even bothering with the porch light this time. I left it on behind me, a square of safety I was already walking away from. The air hit me like a slap, cold, hard, awake. My breath puffed in front of me in little clouds. The grass crunched under my shoes. Max was waiting by the fence, staring at a narrow gap between two boards where the nails had warped over time. He pushed his nose through the gap and sniffed. Then he looked at me, eyes bright, and pawed at the ground. "Max, no," I said automatically. "We're not going through there. It's probably someone else's." That pressure came back, stronger this time. Not words, but intention, insistent. "Follow." My heartbeat pounded in my ears. I reached out and touched the fence. The wood was cold and damp. As my fingers brushed the edge of the gap, the board shifted slightly. The space widened. On the other side, I could see only darkness, broken by the faint suggestion of trees. My backyard ended here. Beyond that fence was the same patch of woods that connected, a few blocks away, to the old trail. I swallowed. "Okay," I whispered. "Okay, just for a second. Just to see." I pulled the board aside just enough for Max to slip through. He hesitated. For the first time that night, he looked unsure. He looked into the dark, then back at me, then slowly he stepped through. "Max," I hissed. "Hey, wait." He vanished into the shadows. I squeezed through the gap after him, splinters scraping my jacket. The ground on the other side was uneven, covered in a mix of dead leaves and dirt that smelled damp and old. The porch light from my house threw a weak rectangle across the ground, but it barely reached us now. Out here, the night felt thicker. I could just make out Max's silhouette a few steps ahead. "Max," I called softly. "Wait, buddy. Stay close." He paused long enough for me to catch up. Then he moved, deeper, into the trees, away from the light. I hesitated. Every rational part of my brain was screaming, "This is stupid. Go back inside. Lock the door. Go to bed. You can deal with whatever this is in the morning." But there was another part of me, the part that still felt that strange, pressing thought, that knew deep down, if I went back inside now, I would never understand what had been circling my life these past weeks. I would never know what my dog had seen or felt. I would never know what I had almost been protected from, or what might come back. So I stepped forward. I followed my dog into the darkness between the trees, with no idea that in less than an hour, I would be standing in a place that, by every rule I understood about the world, should not exist, and that I would see something there that would change the way I looked at my dog, my house, my town, and the night itself, forever. The woods were different now. He couldn't explain why, but the moment he stepped past the split in the trail, the air itself felt wrong. It wasn't colder, not exactly, but thinner, as though the night had been quietly drained of something essential. The silence had weight. Even the crickets had vanished. Only the sound of his dog's paws broke the stillness.
Top, 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 stop.
The dog kept pausing, head low, sniffing at the ground as if tracking something that had passed only seconds ago. Each time it stopped, the man found himself holding his breath, waiting, listening for whatever sign had drawn the animal into the woods in the first place. But there was nothing, just the dark, and the quiet, and that strange sense of being watched by something he couldn't see. He swallowed hard and adjusted the flashlight. Its beam flickered again, just for a split second, but long enough to make his heart thump against his ribs. He told himself it was the batteries. He told himself everything had a logical explanation. But deep inside, he knew that wasn't true. Not tonight. The first sign something was wrong. About 20 yards past the clearing, the dog froze. Not slowed, not sniffed, froze. Its muscles locked, its tail straightened, and its ears shot upward as though it had heard something too quiet for human ears. The man stepped closer, whispering the dog's name. Nothing. The dog didn't look back, didn't react, didn't even blink. Then, without warning, it growled. A low, vibrating growl that didn't sound like fear or excitement, but warning. The man lifted the flashlight and followed the dog's gaze. First, he saw nothing, just a cluster of trees and a wall of darkness. Then the light caught something, barely, something pale, something still, just behind the tree line. He blinked, stepped forward, and raised the beam again. Nothing, but the dog growled harder, louder now, shifting its weight back and forth like it was preparing to lunge. All at once, the man felt it, that ancient, instinctive chill humans feel only when something is staring at them from the dark. He lowered his voice. Hey boy, easy, easy. But the dog wasn't looking at him. It wasn't listening. It wasn't moving. It was locked onto something he couldn't see. Something that had been there a moment ago. Something that had stepped back into the dark. A trail that didn't belong. The dog suddenly pulled left, dragging him off the main path, deeper into the trees. The man resisted for a moment, but the leash tightened, and the dog whimpered. An anxious, urgent whine he had never heard before. The kind that said, "We have to follow this now." Against every instinct telling him to turn back, the man allowed himself to be pulled forward. The terrain changed beneath his boots. Less dirt, more leaves, more roots, more shadows. The flashlight flickered again. This time longer. Too long. He tapped it. The beam returned, but narrower, dimmer, almost tired. He exhaled slowly. Then something caught his eye. Footprints. Not paw prints. Not boots. Bare feet. Small. Child-sized. Pressing deep into the earth as though the person who made them had been running hard. His throat tightened. A child. Out here. Alone. In the woods. At nearly midnight. The dog sniffed one footprint, trembled, then immediately pulled ahead, following the track deeper and deeper into the trees. The man hesitated. Everything in him knew this was wrong. Children don't run barefoot into the woods at night. Not in this town. Not in winter. Not under a moonless sky. Unless they were scared. Or lost. Or taken. A cold tremor climbed his spine. He followed. The unnatural silence. The deeper he went, the more the silence thickened until even his breathing sounded intrusive. He checked the time on his phone. 11:58 p.m. He looked up. The moon should have been visible through the break in the canopy, but the sky was pitch black, like someone had smothered it with ink. His chest tightened. He whispered, "This doesn't make sense." The dog growled again. This time the growl sounded different. Less warning, more fear. The man knelt beside it, gently placing a hand on its back. "It's okay. I'm here." The dog didn't believe him. Its body quivered like something unseen was circling them, moving just beyond the reach of the flashlight. The man forced himself not to look into the dark. But curiosity, fear, and adrenaline twisted together until he couldn't help it. He raised the beam and froze. The first glimpse, between two thick pines, far enough to blend with the dark, but close enough to recognize as human, stood a figure. Still, silent, facing him. He couldn't see the face, couldn't see the clothes, just the shape, thin, motionless, faintly outlined by the weak flashlight. He blinked once. The figure didn't move. He blinked again. It was gone. No sound. No movement.
No trace.
But the dog barked. A sharp, frightened bark that echoed through the trees. The man stumbled backward, clutching the leash, scanning the woods frantically. Nothing. Not a branch moving. Not a shadow shifting. Not a sound. Just emptiness. The man's breath came faster now, fogging the air. He whispered, "Hello? Is someone there?" Silence. The kind of silence that feels like a reply. When the woods began to whisper, the dog pulled the man forward again, this time to the right, toward a narrow slope he didn't remember ever seeing. Something about the path looked wrong. The ground wasn't shaped like natural erosion. It looked carved, deliberately, clean, like something had dragged itself through the earth, leaving a long, shallow groove. The dog sniffed it and recoiled immediately, whimpering. The man knelt and ran his fingers along the soil. The groove was cold. Not winter cold. Not night cold. But unnaturally cold. He pulled his hand back fast and wiped it against his jacket, his pulse racing. What is this? A sound drifted through the trees. A whisper. Not wind. Not leaves. Not branches. A whisper. Soft. Barely audible. Almost a voice. He held his breath. There it was again. This time clearer. Like someone exhaling words inches from his ear. Only no one was near him. He turned slowly, flashlight shaky in his hand. Who's there? Nothing. The whispering faded. Then stopped completely. But the dog didn't stop. It tugged again violently, pulling him toward a small clearing shaped like a bowl carved in the earth. A place where the darkness felt thicker, heavier, older. The flashlight flickered harder now. Once, twice, dim. The man felt sweat gathering at the back of his neck despite the cold. He understood something then, something terrifying. He wasn't following his dog anymore. He was being led by something else. Something that wanted him in that clearing. Something patient. Something deliberate. Something watching. The dog whimpered at the edge of the clearing, refusing to go farther, pulling back so hard the leash trembled in the man's hand. For a moment he considered turning around, running, leaving the woods behind. But then he saw it. At the far edge of the clearing, illuminated by the dying beam of his flashlight. A shape on the ground. Small. Still. Barefoot. A child. Or what looked like one. Face down. Motionless. His breath caught in his throat. He stepped forward. Slowly. Cautiously. Each movement careful and deliberate. Hey, are you okay? Silence. He took another step. Then another. And as he approached, his stomach sank. This wasn't right. Nothing about this was right. He knelt beside the small body, his hands shaking as he reached out. Hey, can you hear me? The dog barked once, sharp, panicked. Too late. The moment his fingers touched the shoulder of the child-shaped figure on the ground, the body moved, not like a child, not like anything human, not naturally, but with a jerk, quick, stiff, broken, like a puppet forced upright by invisible strings. The head twisted, slowly, too slowly, and the face, it wasn't a child's face at all. The man stumbled backward, screaming, as the thing in front of him opened its mouth wider than any human jaw should open and whispered the same words he had heard in the woods. You shouldn't have followed. He stood at the edge of the clearing, dizzy, breathless, and unable to make sense of what he had just witnessed. His dog Rex circled him anxiously, whining, nudging his leg as if urging him to move, to run, to escape the forest entirely. But he couldn't, not yet. Something inside him insisted that the worst, or the truth, was still ahead. The clearing was quiet, too quiet. The air felt wrong, heavy in a way he had never experienced before, as if something around him had swallowed all sound and kept only the pulse of his own fear. And then he noticed it. Path. Narrow. Faded. Barely visible beneath dead leaves and tangled roots. But it was there. A place where something had traveled enough times to leave a mark. Rex saw it too. His ears perked, nostrils flaring. He took a few slow steps toward it, then looked back at his owner, tail stiff, waiting for permission. He swallowed hard. All right, boy, he whispered, voice trembling. If we go together. And they stepped forward. The path that shouldn't have been there. From the moment he entered the narrow trail, he felt it. A shift in the forest. A tension in the branches overhead. The certainty that this part of the woods was not meant to be found. It was colder here. Much colder. Rex pressed close to his leg, growling softly at shadows that moved without wind. What the hell is this place? He whispered. No answer. Not even an echo. The forest absorbed his voice like a sponge. He walked deeper, the darkness thickening around him. The moon no longer reached this part of the woods. It was as if the trees themselves leaned together to hide the sky. And then he saw it. A shape, far ahead. Still. Motionless. At first he thought it was a tree trunk. twisted, tall, stretching upward like a rotting pillar. But as he approached, dread prickled across his skin. Because the shape wasn't wood. It was stone. A standing stone. Ancient, cracked, covered in deep grooves that looked like carvings. Symbols. Runes. Marks older than memory. Rex began barking furiously, pulling at the leash, trying to drag him back the way they came. Rex, stop. What's wrong? What do you? But then he heard it. A low hum. A vibration in the air. A faint trembling beneath his boots. The stone was not silent. It was alive. His breath caught in his throat. What are you? He whispered. A presence older than the forest. The temperature dropped again. Sharply, painfully. And the night air filled with a strange metallic scent. He stepped closer to the stone, his hand lifting instinctively, drawn toward the carvings like a moth to flame. Rex lunged, barking wildly, teeth bared. Something primal in the dog exploded as if trying to save him from touching it. But something else happened first. The carvings began to glow. Not brightly, not violently, but subtly, like embers under ash, like eyes opening in the dark. And his mind filled with a sudden, overwhelming impression. You should not be here. He stumbled back, heart racing. The forest seemed to exhale around him. Branches creaked. Leaves trembled. Shadows deepened. Something was watching him. Not from the trees. Not from the ground. From the stone. Rex snarled, placing himself between his owner and the carving, trembling with fear and instinct. The man felt a voice inside him. Not heard, but sensed. Leave, now. He whirled around. Something moved behind him. He didn't see it. Only felt the shift of air, the pressure, the cold breath of something stepping closer. Rex barked furiously. He turned back to the stone. The glow had intensified, but not evenly. Just one symbol. A single vertical mark at the center of the stone, brightening like a slit of fire, like an eye opening. He froze. Rex whimpered. The forest held its breath. And then, crack, the stone split, just slightly, just enough to reveal a sliver of darkness within. And something inside that darkness shifted. He screamed for Rex. They ran, running through the night. Branches tore at his clothes. Cold air burned his lungs. Rex barreled ahead, barking at shadows, guiding him as if he knew the way by instinct alone. Behind them, he heard it. Not footsteps, not breathing, something else. A pulse, a vibration, a thick, slow thrum that made the earth tremble under his feet. It followed them. It wanted them. And the deeper he ran into the forest, the more he realized something horrifying. The path had disappeared. They were no longer following a trail. They were being chased through a maze of trees that all looked the same. Twisting, closing in, changing shape. He tripped, fell, hit the ground hard. Rex circled back, barking desperate warnings. He pushed himself up, gasping, dizzy, disoriented. And that's when he saw it. Something moving between the trees. Tall, thin, shifting like smoke. Watching him, he stumbled away from it, terrified. But then, out of nowhere, the forest opened. Clearing. A familiar clearing. He had looped back to the place where the night began. Rex howled. And the figure behind the trees retreated slowly, merging with the darkness, disappearing as if it had never been there at all. He collapsed to his knees, Rex pressing close to him, licking his hands, whining softly. He was trembling uncontrollably. The night was silent again. But he knew, deep in his bones, that something had followed him. Something ancient. Something awakened by his presence. Something that had been waiting for someone, anyone, to find that stone. He'd gone looking for his dog. And instead, he'd found the kind of truth people avoid all their lives. A truth no one would believe. Not until they stood where he stood. Not until they heard the forest whisper back. Before we continue into the final part of the story, where he discovers what actually lived inside that stone, I want to thank you for supporting this channel. If you enjoy stories like this, if you want more real-life mysteries, eerie encounters, and late-night tales, Sparkles, hit the like button. Sparkles, subscribe to the channel. Sparkles, and drop a comment telling me if you would have followed the dog into the woods. Your support truly helps keep these stories alive. All night, Daniel kept replaying the event in his mind. The way Max barked at something that wasn't there. The shadow passing behind the barn. The woman calling for help in a voice that didn't belong to anything human. He had returned home physically, but his thoughts were still trapped out there in the woods, where the world felt thin and the darkness seemed alive. He kept Max close to him, afraid the dog might sense something and bolt again. But Max didn't. The dog lay quietly at Daniel's feet, not whimpering, not pacing, not even reacting to the sounds outside. It was as if he knew the night was no longer his enemy, or as if the thing that had followed them wasn't trying to hide anymore. Around 3 a.m., Daniel finally began drifting into a restless sleep. But then he heard it. A knock. Soft, slow, deliberate, not on the door, not even on the walls. Came from the window. Daniel froze. The house had no neighbors close enough to wander onto his land. No late-night visitors. No reason for anyone to be tapping on his glass in the dead of night. Max lifted his head, ears forward, body tense. Daniel whispered, "Don't move." The knock came again, this time slightly louder, as if whoever or whatever stood outside wanted him to know it could be patient, but not forever. He forced himself to stand and walked slowly toward the window. The curtains were thin, a silhouette pressed gently against them. Human, still, watching. Daniel's breath caught in his throat. His throat went dry. He felt every hair on his arms rise as if the air itself had become electric. With trembling fingers, he pulled the curtain aside and found nothing, absolutely nothing, just the quiet, empty yard, the motionless barn, the pale moon resting on the horizon. But then Max growled, low, deep, the kind of growl that means a dog doesn't see a threat. He feels it. Before Daniel could move, the porch light flickered once, twice, then went out completely. Darkness swallowed the yard, and from somewhere behind the barn came the woman's voice again, soft, distant, almost pleading. "Daniel? Come help me. I'm still waiting." It wasn't possible. Daniel slammed the curtain shut and stepped back. He knew two things with absolute certainty. 1. That voice did not belong to a living woman. 2. Whatever had spoken her words knew his name now. And it wasn't calling for help this time. It was calling for him. The next morning, Daniel didn't sleep. He waited for the sun like a man stranded at sea waits for the shore. When the light finally broke through the windows, he grabbed his boots, his keys, and Max's leash. But Max refused to leave the house. He planted his paws against the doorway and wouldn't move. Not with coaxing. Not with commands. Not with force. Daniel realized Max wasn't afraid of what was outside. He was afraid of what might follow them back. So Daniel went alone, back through the path, past the trees, and toward the barn where everything began. He expected to feel the same suffocating heaviness, the sense of being watched, the cold running through his spine. But the woods were quiet, calm, almost peaceful. He approached the barn door and stepped inside. The smell of damp hay lingered. Dust particles floated through narrow beams of sunlight. A few tools lay on the floor, nothing unusual, nothing out of place, nothing to suggest anything supernatural had happened the night before. Except one thing. In the dirt, near the back wall where Daniel remembered seeing the shadow, someone had drawn a symbol. 3 lines, intersecting, almost like a distorted star. It wasn't from an animal. It wasn't natural. It was a mark, a deliberate one. And next to it, a fresh dog collar. Max. The one he had lost in the woods days earlier. Daniel slowly picked it up. The metal was ice cold. Far too cold to have been lying in the sunlit barn. As he turned to leave, he noticed something else. Footprints. Not his. Not human. Not animal. Shaped like nothing he had ever seen. They trailed behind the barn, disappearing into the woods. Daniel didn't follow them. He returned home, locked the door, and sat on the floor with Max beside him. He whispered, We're done with those woods. We're never going back. But that night, just past midnight, he heard the knock again. Soft, slow, deliberate. This time, he didn't go to the window. But Max did. And instead of growling, he wagged his tail, as if whatever stood outside wasn't a threat anymore. Or worse, as if it had already found a way in. Daniel never told anyone what happened in the woods. Not the voice that didn't belong. Not the shadow that moved without light. Not the symbol carved in the dirt. Not the footprints that vanished into nothing. But he felt it. Every night when the house grew quiet, something had followed him home. Not to hurt him, not to scare him, but to watch, to wait, to remind him that some things in the dark don't disappear when the sun rises. They simply choose not to be seen. Max still sleeps at Daniel's side, calm and loyal as ever. But on certain nights, only the quiet ones. Max lifts his head, stares at the front door, and wags his tail gently, as if greeting something Daniel can't see. Something he hopes he'll never have to. Something that still whispers from far beyond the barn. Daniel, I'm still waiting.